You are listening to the Push Media Podcast Network.
I remember when my wife and kids died in a car accident. The only thing that made me feel better was listening to the Colin Coyle podcast.
This is good shit.
Free the West Memphis 3. Guten Tag, Lil Ho. I hope you caught our sleepy Fuhrer give his national address a few days ago at the City of Brotherly Love, Philadelphia, in front of Independence Hall, the birthplace of the third incarnation of democracy in the modern world, even though we invented it. And if you're Mormon, we have Jesus to thank for that, because of course, Jesus was an American and our religion's not made up. But anyway, if you watched Joe Biden give his national address a few days ago, actually, who am I kidding? You didn't. Because why would you watch a national address from the president during a time of impending nuclear war? That's just silly. I get it. So, like most people, I'm sure instead what you did do is see a bunch of articles, a slew of them perhaps, the next day on Twitter, however you partake in media takeout. And in fact, you would read those articles and probably most of you were like, you know, the content of these articles address very little as to the subject matter of Joe Biden's speech. Instead, it just seems to be anyone who writes articles kind of saying, you know, this speech bears a striking resemblance to most of the media that came out of the Third Reich. Ain't that strange? Color my schnitzel surprised. And, you know, that's just how silly shit is now. I don't think there's any way around that anymore. I think just when the peak absurd has been reached, all of a sudden, Joe Biden gives a national address that isn't a national address in front of Independence Hall, really an icon of democracy, and somehow makes that iconic symbol look identical to most of the places where Hitler gave speeches. And all the time, I was just thinking, boy, I bet Trump's jealous, because he's like, man, I'm trying to get fans like this guy. That's what I've been saying. So, just to recap, if you didn't know anything about as to what I said and think I'm just, you know, experiencing a real-time malaria fever dream. Couple things. The national address that Joe Biden gave everyone, no one really knew what the intent of it was, because usually a national address, that's actually a thing. That's a term. That's a legitimate, you know, specific title for a thing. It usually occurs when presidents need to address the nation after something tragic, serious. Basically, it's very objective. It just says the president will get everyone's attention, say, hey, fucko, and all fuckos will turn and say, what? President will say, this is what happened. This is what we'll do, and this is what you need to do. Go about your day, play ball, go shop. But instead, Joe Biden somehow turned the national address into a campaign rally that rattled off perceived accomplishments of which there were very little. And what it did do is prove that there were at least 30 people, I'm going to guess, who work in his cabinet, work for the White House, work for, you know, the cable channel that was recording the works for CNN. If you own fucking CNN, if you were behind the camera that day, what my point here is that there were at least 50 people whose job it was to have eyeballs that day, who saw the frame going out to live television, and all of them thought, you know what, this doesn't look like Hitler. Why the fuck does Hitler keep getting brought up, for one? I have a very big bone to pick with that whole thing. We get it happened, no one's denying it, but do we need to beat it into the heads of children in our curriculum? That's all I'm saying, but, you know, we keep going. The fact that the frame, just the literal frame on television that you saw if you were one of the bozos tuning in to hear what the president had to say in case a nuke was going to go off, what you saw was Joe Biden standing in front of Independence Hall, in which the entire background was the most saturated, blood-soaked, deeper than your mom loves me and I love her, even though we don't have a physical relationship anymore, color red. I'm talking blood-soaked red. It was ridiculous. In fact, you couldn't even tell it was Independence Hall. And then, of course, if you were to look on Twitter not that long after, you would see pictures of people actually at the event, and you would see that either sides of the Independence Hall were blue, and it was obviously a red, white, and blue theme, motif they were going for with the lighting. But instead of having a gaffer worth their weight in salt, instead they had a gaffer who was about as useful as a bag of dicks without a handle. And if you ain't in the industry like me, I own Warner Brothers, a gaffer is the guy in charge of lighting. The gaffer is the guy who's usually not blind. The gaffer is the guy who's usually not a Nazi sympathizer, apparently. And behind President Biden was a blood-soaked red building. The white column in the middle, at this point, because you couldn't even tell it was white anymore, there was just a protruding angle, which just, visually at a quick glance, it did not look like a double-headed Nazi eagle. But thankfully, visually, to round out the Hitler motif, there were two Secret Servicemen standing behind Joe Biden on either shoulder in a manner not unlike every SS officer pictured with Hitler ever pictured with Hitler. So there are reasons to be concerned. Again, obviously, that seems to be something I say a lot, but that's because there's a lot of reasons to be concerned. Joe Biden's not even a president who likes war. He's a pussy when it comes to war. He'd rather just write checks and go somehow funnel that money out of the Ukraine through his crackhead son or vice versa, or just send more people to prison for profit. The point is, he's willing to do a lot of things before he has to go to war. Which makes me think Joe Biden, and that's not the only reason, the other reason is because I think he's a cadaver, but that's one of the reasons that makes me think Joe Biden wasn't like, now is the time I subtly look like Hitler. I think he was just thinking, like usual, where the fuck am I? But I am hung up on the fact that there were so many people who I didn't think were blind, who worked in the cabinet, who worked for CNN, who were just people there. And then thankfully, to be fair, I should say, CNN, which is turning a new leaf, shout out to you. I'm going to get in on the ground floor, give me points. CNN, some people there were like, oh my goodness gracious, this kind of reminds me of Hitler. That person was fired swiftly. And then the rest of the people at CNN quickly tried to color adjust in real time, color correct the accidental visual motif of Hitler during a president's national address, which wasn't actually a national address. It was instead a thinly veiled campaign rally where he rattled off accomplishments not exactly accurate coming into the midterms. So, kind of disingenuous. And if you don't know the content of what he actually said, I'll give you some highlights. He basically he tried to be a good guy. He tried to play ball. He tried to be America's president. He tried to be folksy yet progressive. He tried to not sniff kids or look like Hitler because he prefaced every attack in which he identified the clear enemy, which is something required for a Civil War. See episodes, all of the last 7 of mine. He at least qualified his othering, to use their word, as Republicans and MAGA Republicans, which is good, which is thankful, which comes in handy. It's important to distinguish that you don't mean all Republicans. You only mean the MAGA idiots, because to be completely objective, and I know you can't take anyone's word as objective, because by the very definition of them talking their bullshit to you, it's subjective. But listen and trust me, even though I'm not the news, it's important to remain an adult and not think the enemy is the entire right side of the ideological spectrum. Because that's just for practical reasons, militaristically, that's a slippery slope to dictatorship, because one party is perceived the universal good guy, other one's the bad guy, draw, quarter, feather, tar, whatever you want to do, stone, you have your pick, and they're gone not that long after. So you don't want that to happen. So it was good Biden made the distinction between MAGA Republicans and Republicans. Me personally, I like a liberal Republican. I like a conservative Democrat. That's the type of person I am, just because it annoys you. But I thought it was nice enough that Biden made a distinction. However, now that I've said that, now that I've said an objective, true thing that is just real, it's good he said that, and it is true, MAGA Republicans, and, I know this is a lot of people's dads. I know this is a lot of guys who had a great time at prom who love talking about their pensions and Dunkin' Donuts. But we're pretty much at the point where MAGA people, MAGA Republican, if you're still a MAGA person at this point, you're supporting a guy who's calling a sitting president an enemy of the state and people in the FBI to rise up violently against that. So we are at the very very, very edge of the cliff as to you actually just being the fucking wrong dickhead. However, and that might be like another t-shirt that we do here or something, right up there with my Cactus Clay idea, just the word however. However, even though MAGA people are pretty much the Confederates, pretty close, if you're the president currently, you can't say that. You know why? Because that is how you identify another side. Bitch. We said this. What do you need to have a war? You need two sides. That's pretty much it. You need two sides, two distinguished and separate groups who have very clearly stated, we ain't fuck with y'all. And with the help of the fucking president currently, that process will be expedited and the jerseys will be distributed post haste. Shirts and skins. Who's ever skins Biden sniffing. I'll see you on the battlefield of the Civil War. Let's just see where the weapons land when everyone runs. It's like a game of freedom. Literally, actually. Wow, that was significantly more poignant than I even meant. And by freedom, I meant the children's game in the neighborhood, not the concept of liberty. I would also like to take this moment to say, fuck Dr. Oz. Thank you very much. I've decided, time to get involved in local politics, real grassroots shit. I've decided, fuck them. I don't think this is a good idea. I think it's time someone speak up. I don't know if it's a great idea to have the Turkish celebrity quack who, peddled raspberries as a weight loss solution to Oprah on television, who's been sued by his sister, who's claimed on The Breakfast Club, incest is fine as long as you're not first cousins. Look that up. I don't think maybe that guy, should get elected. Just my opinion. I've decided to officially go out on a whim and say, John Fetterman has my public support. I've got involved in local politics. What the fuck did you do today? I've decided a fake TV doctor who thinks raspberries are a weight loss solution and used to consult with Oprah shouldn't be president anymore because he's from Turkey, sued by his sister, and supports incest. The other guy doesn't want to wear shirt and tie. I thought I'd speak up and say something because you're supposed to get involved. Be the change you want to see. That's all. Now let's talk about some, much more serious things like Brendan Fraser getting fat. The boy Brendan Fraser getting a whole lot of Oscar buzz for his performance in the movie The Whale from Darren Aronofsky, which sounds like a absolute horrific, no need to exist, nihilistic, masturbatory indulgence in nonsense and love of self. About a super fat guy trying to connect with his daughter he was a terrible parent to. And we feel bad for him, not because he was a failure as a father, but because he's 600 pounds and he didn't put it there. Who made me this fat? Now that mean stuff's out of the way, and I certainly don't have a six-pack, but I have a 13-foot cock, Brendan Fraser, I like him. I love him. I want some more of him. He was the shit from like childhood movies of mine, like all of the Mummy movies. They were awesome. The movie where I thought he was Tarzan until I had to really think about how does memory work because Tarzan didn't go to New York City. Whatever that movie was, I loved it. I even fucked heavy with the first Escape to Witch Mountain, this is the CIA telling you what's going on in NORAD movie before he was, replaced by Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Now, I don't know what happened to Brendan Fraser exactly. I know there was some story, and I didn't even bother to look it up because I think it's very important to sometimes speak completely without any evidence. I know there was something that happened in Brendan Fraser's life where he was in he was abused in some way, shape, or form. I don't really know. But the highlights of the latest Brendan Fraser comeback and what makes it so unique and fascinating really is not the fact that he's not currently the Penguin in all upcoming HBO Batman projects. What's super fascinating is that his comeback has happened, I think, first because he was in the Dallas remake. So he disappeared from the public. He disappeared as a symbol of the late 90s, early 2000s, when they made cool, original property, action, comedy, formulaic, but still fucking fundamental to the ethos, you motherfucker, movies that were so great. Like the aforementioned Mummies and George and Tarzan in the New York City in Escape to Witch Mountain before The Rock came along. Point of what I'm trying to say is he just suddenly disappeared. And then there might have been something that happened to him or whatever. But then he made a comeback hella fat in a cowboy hat, and people were like, we like it. We think you got something here, Brendan. Which is great. I'm not shitting on him, even though I know it sounds like that's all I'm doing. I actually genuinely like the guy. But it's just something so weird to me about this comeback. And it makes me wonder like how he feels about it, because it almost seems like there's like this Elephant Man thing or element to it, because there were reports, and I'm not kidding, and obviously it's not real because he'd be on TLC, not in an Aronofsky movie, but there were reports coming out of the Venice Film Festival after Brendan got the big standing ovation after The Whale, which is that's the most mean thing about what I'm talking about. The name of the movie he's in relation to the size he is. I'm making lighthearted jokes. The director called him a whale, but there were reports coming out that Brendan Fraser, whose character in the movie The Whale, and his character, I'm referring to The Whale, not the title of the movie, his character was 600 pounds. I'm talking a real fat son of a bitch. A real fat bastard, Mike Myers, TLC, I'm either fat or super short type of person. You know, I'm talking wildly obese. And shockingly nimble and mobile in the movie, because who gives a fuck about reality? It's showbiz. Anyway, there were early reports that some of the whale-watching film festival goers that actually were saying, trying to tell the world, trying to actually say, not only is Brendan Fraser about to win an Oscar, this dude is actually 600 pounds. That wasn't CGI. That wasn't a fat suit. That wasn't Colin Farrell. Boy, does he have range. That was actually Brendan Fraser pushing 6 bills. And it was at that moment, I thought a couple things. In no particular order. The first being, dude is not 600 pounds because, like I said, he would have been on TLC, not in an Aronofsky film. Because they have a contractual, it's almost like a birthright clause similar to Jewish people in Israel, where TLC has a claim on your soul if you approach 600 pounds. But Brendan Fraser's not 600 pounds. That was just weird. That was just people feeding fodder for this comeback story. And I like a good comeback story. Who doesn't? I'm currently watching episodes of Lizzo's reality show where she has morbidly obese women audition to be backup dancers because, did you just hear what I said? I'm fucking with it. But this whole narrative with Brendan Fraser, I'm happy he's coming back and all, but it just makes me wonder, like, dude, does this feel weird to you? Are you really being celebrated for the work? Or do you feel like you're getting some type of weird sympathy pity thing where people are just like cucky fat accepting something? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely off base. But the odds of that, I mean, let's face it. I just hope Brendan's in the right frame of mind, and I hope he feels genuine and feels how he should deserve to do whatever the nice thing to say is here. I liked the mummy Brendan Fraser more. That's just what I have to say on this matter. I'm not really here to help anyone's self-esteem. I'm just here to say the dude's not really 600 pounds. And it's a sad state of affairs that it seems like the only way to win an Oscar nowadays is to be retarded, gay, the Joker, a cowboy, or in something about slavery. Now you can add hella fat to that qualified list. And you better believe Scarlett Johansson is eyeing every one of those roles. And at some point, if I am to follow box office trends in the American market, eventually all of those movies will convalesce into an Oscar-winning superhero movie about the Justice League of retarded gay cowboys who own slaves. I said I'm not the news. But anyway, let's talk about Biden, the FBI, and the current president and the former president. So, the latest in the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago. The latest development is that the judge, Eileen Cannon, who granted President Trump's request for a special master to, review all of the material confiscated, blah, 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 blah. This is to just fill you in quickly. A special master, that's another real legitimate term. Capital letters for both. President Trump requested a special master to observe all of the material confiscated by the Department of Justice and the FBI that they got from the raid. And the evidence, by the evidence, I mean the 11 boxes that the FBI walked out of Mar-a-Lago with that they did not walk into with. To be motherfucking direct. So Trump requested a special master, and to do so, he had to appeal to a judge. The judge, Eileen Cannon, granted it. And what a special master is an exalted cyclops in... Never mind. Anyway, wrong website. Anyway, a special master is an attorney who is objective in theory. It's a third party. It's someone who essentially exists as a really, I'm also the record. Let the record show, only that is now a person. So all of the evidence that the FBI and the DOJ has, this person will also look at and say, yes, that is there, which object permanence is something that was lacking in the Trump campaign. So maybe it's a good thing. But anyway, the judge who granted the request from Trump, that decision was made public because that's how the court system here works. A lot of things are very public. You just have to look them up. You could see all of the records that prove there was an island in the Atlantic. Never mind. Anyway, in this decision that was made public, it was revealed a couple things. That the judge, Eileen Cannon, made it very clear that the Biden campaign and Biden himself, even though I can't say it enough, the guy, mental faculties. The Biden campaign and him are not allowed to review any of the evidence confiscated by the FBI and the DOJ. That seems fair, right? You don't want him doing that. You don't want him soiling the goods. These are the things that Trump needs to write a memoir because that's what his fans want. Homework. Anyway, it was also revealed, this little ditty, that it was actually motherfucking the Sleepy Führer himself, Joe Biden, the president, who requested that an investigation happen into documents being taken from the White House, with the primary suspect being Trump. So, now, the important thing about that disclaimer is, on several occasions, very clearly, both he and the press secretary have said that the White House had nothing to do with that. The White House said every step of the fucking way, oh, wow, we had no idea that the FBI did what? What are they saying he had? The president has no comment because he's senile and we've never heard of this before. Well, another example that you've been lied to. That's what he does. He's done that since, he's been in office. He lied about the college he went to, his service record, whole bunch of stuff. He's also saved in his son's phone as Pedo Pete, but I continue. The fact that Joe Biden is the one he himself called for an investigation into Trump. What is going on? Who wants this civil war? Who has money on what side? Who's hedging their bets? Speaking of hedging their bets, did you know the guy who predicted the Wall Street collapse in '08 that had the movie The Big Short made about him? The guy that made all the money? The guy that bet against the housing market? The guy that saw enough data to suggest, I'm going to do what 99% of the greatest minds with money want to do? Do you know what that guy's investing all of his money in lately? Water. Companies that produce and make water. So I hope you're motherfucking ready. I hope you are supplied. I hope you know how to prep a little. Not to get too preppy because you don't want to, start wearing Argyle and take up tennis. And you also don't want to get too preppy and start, thinking we should have our own well and generator and live off the grid. Even though those guys have some information, you should check out some YouTube channels. But certainly seems like the current regime, and I feel comfortable calling the president the regime because he himself took great lengths to look like fucking Hitler. But now all this is going to do is actually legitimize and make Trump at least think in his head, because that's the only motivation that guy has. But all this disclosure is going to do now is make Trump think that he is right, that he is correct, that he is not lying when he says this is a witch hunt, when he says they're out to get me. And then when he tells all of his MAGA Republicans, to use a Joe Biden Führer term, not regular Republicans, we love them, it's just MAGA Republicans. We're not trying to divide people, it's just anyone who wears a very specific hat is the enemy, who's literally threatening violence. But anyway, all of those people currently being identified by the sitting president, the former President Trump now has another reason, another bit of evidence to point to all of his Calvary Minutemen, the MAGA Republicans, the identified enemy by the current president. They have yet another reason to believe in the cause and fight for the good fight, and just like the good people of the FBI, make America great again. Do you see how quickly this can snowball into some shit? And then you're dealing with something like, a blitzkrieg of bozos or a night of broken fat ass. That might have been a reach, the last one I was going for. Oh, whatever. History, a lot of it's a lie anyway. The point of what I'm getting at here is I'm someone who is ahead of trends early. I started wearing Stan Smiths in 2017. It was just me, A$AP Rocky, and now it's all of you years later. Point is, I said a civil war looks like it's very possible. Looks like it could happen. Looks like that might be, unfortunately, how the empire falls. And then, just when I thought maybe, I'm being too calamitous, maybe the sky's not really falling, maybe, sure, I'm just trying to get more people to listen to a podcast, and nothing really gets numbers up quite like hysteria and frenzy. And like I said, I'm not the news, and none of my words are to be taken seriously. However, I'm actually offering you the real shit. That's what makes this so funny to me. The very joke of this show is that I have real shit to tell you, and most of it's made up, but all of it is true. Just when I thought maybe a civil war is too bold of a claim for you, Colin, maybe you should pipe down, pipsqueak, we had President Joe Biden look like Hitler in front of Independence Hall, backed up by the Secret Service, which are the same initials as the SS, in a blood-soaked red building, identifying the enemy. That's another momentary pause for crickets. And now, courtesy of the ADL, we have some data as to who are members of the Oath Keepers, keeping in mind there might be a civil war. But not really. I'm just kidding, but I'm definitely a soothsaying prophet. Who's the guy? Nostradamus. That's me. Colin Stradamus. I'm sorry. Let me get back on topic. Anyway, the ADL, just so happens, released that they have identified 370 people leaked from the Oath Keepers membership lists that it believes currently work in law enforcement agencies across the country, including 10 chiefs and 11 sheriffs. Now, the Oath Keepers were kind of like the Proud Boys. They were another group that stormed the Capitol and tried to overthrow the government. Might have been infiltrated by the FBI. According to the ADL, we have new information that 370 of them, which really made me put in perspective, how many fucking people were at this insurrection? Damn. How many people from Florida really got on a bus that day? But anyway, 370 people in the Oath Keepers are cops in other law enforcement agencies, FBI, or a chief or a sheriff. And get this, the ADL also identified 117 people in the organization currently serve in the U.S. military. But again, don't worry about a civil war. As well as 11 in the reserves and 31 who are contractors or hold civilian positions. So, i.e. assassins, people who talk to aliens or build the spaceships to get to aliens, or guns to kill aliens in space. Good God Almighty. They'd also found, and this is not over, the ADL found that there were 80 individuals who were leaked members of the Oath Keepers who were, as of early August, holding elected office or running for public office, with positions ranging from mayors, town council members, school board members, state representatives, and senators. So, again, I say to you, do you feel a little worried about the Civil War? And you should. You definitely should. You should also worry about a world war. Can you believe? Just take a second. Pause for a second. Stop thinking about how wonderful Brendan Fraser's performance was and just how fat he is. And think that only a month ago, we were worried about a world war, which we still very well should be. We've completely stopped even talking about coronavirus, despite it not going away, mutating, and it seems like there's more vaccine stuff. Anyway, in a month, in a few episodes of the Colin Coyle podcast, Civil war looks a hell of a lot more likely than the other things that already looked certain. So it's times like this that really make you want to believe in the political process, that make you want to have a leader who you feel like kind of has a handle on this shit and isn't dead or didn't recently look like Hitler. But alas, we don't. We have a leader who we all think might be dead, at least has dementia, was helped onto the stage by his wife, to then look like Hitler on television for 15 minutes, rambling about stuff he did, which he didn't, identifying the threat to democracy. They are the people with that specific hat and the political party that's not the one in power currently. But not really. I'm throwing 4 letters in front of it that don't mean anything, but have come to symbolically represent something that people who are legally armed and disenfranchised are willing to die for. And if all else fails, you simply take a page out of Hitler's book, make sure you have people loyal enough around you to kill you, and if that doesn't work, I suppose you flee and head to Argentina.